Okay, I've got one.
Fine, Father, what is it?
All Elgato employees should wear uniforms.
That isn't a hot take. It's a rule that you've already instated.
Oh yeah? Well, then where's your uniform?
Oh, come on, I saved the country like 3 times already.
Well, you won't be here to save it a 4th unless you obey the rules.
Ladies, gentlemen, and monsters of all ages, there is one thing that unites us all as Monster Hunter players. We love hunting monsters. Some of us love hunting big monsters, some of us love hunting small monsters, me, and some of us love hunting one specific monster and hate the rest of the game entirely. Everyone has opinions, and I'm not necessarily here to say whether an opinion is right or wrong, but sometimes opinions are presented in a way that is unnecessarily rude, are particularly silly, in a way that just completely ignores all logic just for the sake of getting the person's anger out. I see a lot of these opinions in my day-to-day life, and today I'm here to share some of those with you, while also sharing my opinions about those opinions. Of course, a disclaimer that I don't dislike any of these people necessarily as people, I just take issue with the way that they express themselves in this specific moment, and I genuinely hope that less and less of these come up over time. After all, I would prefer it if we all get along as a community, you know? That said, some people would prefer that we get even farther and farther apart. So, Gallius, if you wouldn't mind getting us started.
Can we please add ELO matchmaking and higher skill ceilings on weapons with relative damage per input?
Okay, I can see where this may come from, but ELO matchmaking for Monster Hunter is one of the silliest things I've ever heard. This is a system that matches people up based on their skill levels, and what you're essentially asking for is that good hunters only ever play with good hunters and bad hunters only ever play with bad hunters. But that isn't at all what Monster Hunter is about. This isn't a PvP game where your experience is directly tied to the quality of other human players in your game. This is PvE. Every hunter on your team is trying their hardest, unless they are a legitimate troll, and even hunters who are weaker than others are just learning. If you only put the worst hunters together, then these bad hunters, quote unquote, will never have a chance to learn from better hunters, because the reality is that bad hunters tend to just be inexperienced hunters. They don't get the chance to grow into better hunters unless you let them hunt with people who are more experienced. If you want to control who you hunt with, then hunt with your friends, join a Discord community, or just hunt by yourself or do follower missions. But Monster Hunter multiplayer has always been about people coming together from all walks of life all over the world to overcome a challenge together. It's not about being perfectly skill matched and getting the shortest kill times possible. Random multiplayer isn't for speedruns, it's for fun and building the community. As for higher skill ceilings, this isn't even a thing you can just add. The weapons are what they are. There is no way to change these skill ceilings without directly changing the weapons and the way that they play and making them no longer be what they are. If you don't like the way that your weapon feels, just play a different one. There are 14 of them in the game that offer vastly different experiences and all feel great to play. Gallius?
Miss very much the graphics and the way MHW was. I haven't bought Rise because for me it doesn't feel like a good Monster Hunter. It's just too fancy for a good hunt to be played.
Games are not all about graphics, friend, especially Monster Hunter, and I've heard this 1,000 times. Monster Hunter Rise and Sunbreak do not look bad at all. No, they don't quite have the graphical fidelity of World and Iceborne, but I would argue the monsters themselves look better than they have ever before, even in those games. Even if sometimes the world environments themselves can get a little bit grainy. More importantly, it just doesn't matter that much. The most important thing in a Monster Hunter game is the way that the gameplay feels. That said, you immediately then call the game too fancy, which I assume means you're talking about things like switch skills and silk binds, and well, you can play the whole game without ever touching those if you really don't want to. It's an option. Yeah, it nerfs you quite hard with certain weapons, but you can play the game without ever touching them, and it's your choice. And I have to assume that you've not even tried this game to know if you'd like that fanciness just based on the way that you worded this statement, because it really isn't too fancy. Yes, there is more going on than in World and Iceborne mechanically speaking, but it is presented in a way that is really approachable and easy to understand after your first couple hours of gameplay. It's smooth, it's fun, and it may be a bit fancy, but it definitely isn't too fancy for a good hunt to be played. What you meant to say here, if anything, is you don't like the pace of these games. Not that the game is objectively too fancy for good hunts. You're basically just saying that good hunts don't exist in these games, and that's just patently false. Gallius?
How's about put make a monster that and this is cause my boy is already in there? How about a new variation of Zenoga, kinda like I suggested about 3 games ago?
Have you ever had a dream that you could you do you want you could do so you want.
Okay, the first half of that sounds like a child trying to form their first sentence, and yet somehow the second part is even more ridiculous to me, because 3 games ago we got Thunderlord Zinogre, a deviant for Zinogre, who was in fact a new version of Zinogre. In Iceborne you got the return of Zinogre and Stygian Zinogre, whose movesets were particularly revamped, essentially being different monsters. And then in Rise we had another Zinogre who got a full-on moveset change once again, along with an actual visual change, which is quite awesome. And then we also got Apex Zinogre, of course, too. How many Zinogres do you need in order to accept that Zinogre is still around and getting love? Damn, Gallius.
Game's fun, but it's still far too easy. Even afflicted monsters don't really feel hard. Sunbreak was definitely a step in the right direction from base Rise, but Monster Hunter really needs to go back to being a harder game than it currently is.
2 things here for sure. First off, Sunbreak is not easy. Afflicted monsters are not easy. They can do upwards of 80% of your health in a single hit if they get you. They attack quickly, which means they're more likely to get you, and some of their larger attacks can even one-shot you. You have just gotten better as a hunter over time. I say this a lot, but the more Monster Hunter games that you play, the better you get at the pure concept of hunting. The more you cart, the more you learn how to avoid carting. And so every Monster Hunter game that you play will feel a little bit easier than the last, unless you start going backwards in the series, because it will take a little bit for your brain to adjust to changes that make the movement less fluid. Secondly, Sunbreak isn't done, and neither are afflicted monsters. If you really genuinely think that the A4 tier of monsters is the last we'll see of anomaly monsters, then you don't have much foresight, because something like afflicted Tigrex definitely will exist. So just wait for the updates to roll out. Imagine something like afflicted Espinas. Espinas is a base monster, already does loads of damage, charges around the place, and can apply fire, poison, and paralysis in one attack. Afflicted Espinas is going to kick people's ass to camp like crazy, and that isn't even the highest tier of monster that there is. Not to mention new monsters being added in title updates as well that will almost undoubtedly be quite challenging. The really challenging monsters in Iceborne all started coming after release. The base game is what the base game is, but the title updates will almost undoubtedly bring more and more difficulty as time passes. Gallius?
No one plays this bogus-ass mid-game for losers. Walk an L of a game.
Who shit in your cereal and called it a Lucky Charm? Why are you even commenting on a Monster Hunter post if this is how you feel about Monster Hunter? More than that, you're just factually incorrect. Literally millions of people play Sunbreak. This is the type of comment that I mean when I say some people are just angry about their own lives and looking for somewhere to vent about it whether they mean it or not. But it's goddamn sad that you both feel this negatively about this game and also choose to take the time out of your day, out of your life, to come and say this on a Monster Hunter post. Life is a limited resource. We all only have so much time on this planet, and this is how you chose to spend some of it. Just, what's the point, Gallius?
I'm hoping now y'all focus on Monster Hunter stories too.
But what? Monster Hunter Stories 2 is done. This is like when I mentioned that the team making the numbered games and the team making the portable games are separate and don't slow each other down, but it times 10. I don't know why I even have to point this out, but the developer team that makes Monster Hunter Stories, a critter collecting turn-based cartoony style game, is not the same one that makes any mainline Monster Hunter titles. If Stories 2 still had content to be released, then Sunbreak would not have slowed that down. That game is done releasing stuff, and that game got an absolute load of things too, so it's not like it was ever just abandoned too early. It reached its completion and then had a bunch of updates too. There will be more Stories games in the future, almost definitely, but I wouldn't get your hopes up on more content for Stories 2 specifically, and I definitely wouldn't blame Sunbreak for that either. Gallius?
Added not 1, but 2 crabs. A vast improvement.
Now this is someone who understands Monster Hunter. Crabs are the ideal monster type, and the only thing holding Sunbreak back from being the best Monster Hunter game of all time is more crabs. We need to reach crab critical mass, for crabs are the only monsters truly worth hunting. That'll do it for today, everyone. Thank you all for listening to me rant and rave about things that I see on the internet. I hope you've gotten some enjoyment out of it. As always, feel free to share your own hot takes in the comments down below. Like if you like the video, subscribe to the notification bell for more, and most importantly, ladies and gentlemen, until next time, stay sweet.
Josh, Cotton, and Hollow with the videos, dropping the humor like a hammer on your tippy toes, bringing entertainment on a daily arrangement to take our insanity and turn it into entertainment. Yes, I said entertainment twice, to reiterate that it is nice to look into your faces on a mostly daily basis when you let us in your homes to make the whole world a stage. Goodbye.